One thing to distinguish is theology. There's really only one theology that's of interest. That's fundamentalism, which means a bunch of things, but it includes biblical inerrancy and biblical supremacy. Inerrancy means that the Bible is believed true for certain in all respects. Everything it says is true. Supremacy means it's the top guide to religion and action. And those are a couple of the fundamental tenets of fundamentalism. There are others. This is the theology that's most closely associated with creationism. It also tends to be biblical literalist, meaning a literal reading of the Bible. But fundamentalists are not entirely literalists. With the literalists on a lot of points, you can't quite say that it's the same thing. Now, a bunch of other ideas you don't want to use are charismatic, people who speak in tongues. They're not all fundamentalists. They're not all creationists. You don't want to use the word evangelical. In fact, evangelical is a term almost any Christian can use, although only about a third of the Protestants use it. The term means sharing the good word. And it's basically Protestants especially believe, and Catholics as well though, an obligation to share the good word. It's evangelical. Born again is another term you don't want to use. I've already explained why. The prosperity gospel, that's another example of something that isn't the same as creationism. Millennialism, that's not creationism. Don't use those words. Now, political groups also, you need to think about how are they distinguished. The group we're interested in doesn't have a name, unfortunately. We don't have a precise name for that group, and this is an assignment. This is an assignment for you guys. Go figure out the right name, the exactly right name for the group we're talking about, because I don't know that name. But what we're talking about is active opponents of accurate science, education, and public schools. And I'm going to call them science education critics. And these slides are SEC, which suggests Security Exchange Commission. I'm going to use it for science education critics. Just in these slides. I don't think that's a good term. I'm not recommending it. I just had to do something. Now, the radical religious right is a larger group. They're not the same thing. We'll probably want to say radical religious right when we're writing stuff, partly because we don't have a term. We don't have an exactly right term. When you guys come up with one, then we'll use it. Now, there's a larger group, which I'll call movement conservatives. I didn't invent that term. It's a pretty good word to describe it, but it really means the radical religious right plus radical libertarians in coalition. Then finally, a much larger group is creationists. That's the majority of the citizens. They're creationists. They believe God created human beings in different versions. We'll talk a little bit about some of the different versions of that. That's a much bigger group. And most of them are not radical religious right, and they're not libertarians. So you don't want to use the word creationist either. That's not who we're dealing with. We're dealing with people who are creationists, but there are a bunch of other things besides. So who's included in the SEC, the science education critics? Well, movement conservatives, but not all of them. Radical religious right, but not all of them. Southern Baptists are pretty big, but not all of them. Creationists, actually only a fairly small share of creationists. Not even all the politically active creationists. What we are talking about are people who are, first of all, miraculous creationists. They believe not just that there was creation, but that miracles occur, and probably a constant stream of miracles. So that's an important notion, not just creationism, but miraculous creationism. And there are several flavors. There's young Earth, and the Earth is 10,000 years old. There's old Earth. The Earth is old, but people are new. There's intelligent design, whatever that is. No one ever could figure it out. But not theistic creationists, people who say God created man by means of evolution. That's not part of what we're talking about. Now, all of the guys we're talking about, what I call the SEC, and all the radical religious right, are politically mobilized. These are people who are politically active. We're trying to make things happen. They work together, they're disciplined. And the second thing about them is they're dominionist, or you could call them political evangelists, which means they're demanding that their religious system be culturally reinforced in the public education system. And this is the key definition. These are people that want their religion taught in the public schools. However, some members of the radical religious right are basically educational separatists. They're opposed to public education entirely. They want to have private schools and want to homeschool people. But the people we're dealing with are attacking the public schools. They're not separatists. What are their tactics? Well, they're basically fourfold tactics of the SEC. And I'm going to take them to what I think is the most effective and the least effective. The most effective tactic they have is quiet challenges and pressure at the level of individual schools to texts and courses. They're in there every time somebody teaches evolution, their kid comes home and tells them, and they go home and talk to the principal, or they talk to the teacher. And if that doesn't work, they talk to the school board. This isn't public, it's private. And the best defense of this is making it public, by the way. When there are challenges, you want to get it as public as possible, as soon as possible. Now, the second most effective thing they do is electoral and administrative politics, which is what we've been hearing about. Kansas Board of Education fights. They win it one year, they lose it the next year. It's effective in a way, but it's really not nearly as effective as this private stuff. Because the private stuff goes on no matter what happens at the electoral level, at the regulatory level. The third thing that they do is ideological legal struggle. The intelligent design is the most recent version of this. They always lose. So it's not effective, except it works for a while, it gives them cover, it protects the guys up at the top doing these quiet challenges. But in the long run, it's a struggle, but it's one that we always win, we always lose. Then finally, they do a lot of agitation and propaganda. They write letters to the paper. We should write letters to answer them. They're keeping their people stirred up, and we want to keep our people stirred up. But it doesn't ultimately move the battle on. Now, here's a kind of an attitude model for the U.S. public. I made these numbers up, don't believe them. I'm a social scientist, I can do that. But I did look at opinion polls a bit. So this is my guess as to what the world might be like. Call this a hypothesis. This is sort of the way to think about the world. This isn't too far off. First of all, you've got the miraculous creationists. And that's probably a solid, people that are real solid in their mind that miracles kept happening and happening. Probably a third of the population. And 20% of the population are not just miraculous creationists, they're also school dominionists. They want their religion taught in the school. They want their miracles taught in the schools. And of those, I think probably 18% or so are politically mobilized. That's our SEC group. And a couple percent are separatists. They just want to go their own way. Ignore you, all you evil people on your way to hell. Then I'm guessing 13%, something like that, are school compromisers. These are the guys that says, I'd be happy if we teach the controversy, teach both sides. This is the key battle currently, is to teach the controversy battle. Then a couple percent are probably willing to accept church-state separation, which people should realize separation of church and state was invented by Baptists. This was invented by the guys that are now leading the charge. The Baptists said, we don't want state messing in the church. So they invented the term, separation of church and state, a couple hundred years ago. And it's still there a little bit in the back of their mind. It can appeal to some of them. The second large group is compartmentalized or confused creationists. They've got some science in their mind, they've got some creation in their mind. You can make them go either way if you phrase your questions right. And that's probably a quarter of the population. And 20% of those, of the population, are people like that, and they say, teach the controversy, especially since I don't even know the right answer myself. So, you know, who am I? Who am I to say what to teach? Then 5% would say, I believe in traditional separation of church and state.